an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Have you ever wondered why you and most of the women you know seem tired so much of the time? Well, this is the podcast where we explore why. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Vedboncoeur. I'm a naturopathic doctor, hockey and baseball mom, bookworm, and nerd at heart who's fascinated by the state of modern women's health and well-being. I've had the privilege of treating thousands of women in my practice over the past 14 years, and hearing your stories has taught me an important lesson. Women are incredibly strong, resilient, and self-aware. And yet, too many of us are struggling to show up fully in our lives because we're tired and unwell. I want you to have the energy you need to share your unique gifts with the world because we are in desperate need of more female leadership. So join me for conversations that will help you feel less alone, more informed about all the things that might be draining your energy, and inspired to fix your fatigue and wake up every morning feeling rested and excited for the day ahead. I can't wait to share today's episode with you. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the Fatigue Fixer. Today, we are talking about money. Money. Money is something that a lot of us have been told we're not supposed to talk about. Like sex and politics, it's not very welcome at the dinner table. And yet, money has such a big impact on our health, our well-being, and our day-to-day life. Maybe you're the kind of person who lies awake at night worrying about money. Or maybe you prefer the more ignorance is bliss approach. I get it. I used to never look at my bank account. But that changed when I hired our guest today, April Stroink. She really helped me to understand my emotional relationship to money and to help me start actually being really honest and clear about my money and my spending habits. Because here's the thing, your money and your health are deeply connected. I can vividly remember a time when I had just graduated from naturopathic school. I was living in my own apartment for the first time, and I wasn't making a whole lot of money. But I owed $200,000 in debt because of my schooling. And I remember one month in particular where I literally hid from my landlord because I didn't have enough money in my bank account to pay my rent. And I remember lying awake at night and for me, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, there is no stress like being worried about money. It's like a whole specific brand of stress on its own. And we also know that your socioeconomic status or your financial health is directly related to your health. It's a big social determinant of health. No matter how much money you make, money and your relationship to it impact your health and your well-being, and that's what we will be talking about today. My guest today is April Stroink. She is a money coach, financial advisor, and certified profit-first professional who specializes in helping people create and enjoy financial well-being in their business and their personal lives. April is a gifted teacher and speaker, and she has been such a supportive guide to me over the past 3 years. She's helped me to understand and feel more confident about my finances and my future goals. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that April has helped change my life, because part of why I want to have this conversation is that money really does impact your day-to-day life. And so much of your life is going to be impacted by what's happening with your bank account. And so your financial wellness is a huge part of your health and your overall wellness. So April, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. I wonder if we can start. One of the first things you had me do, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't, but one of the first things you had me do was to help me identify what I'm going to call like my money personality, or kind of like my relationship with money. And I was thinking about this because, as you know, I'm someone who spends very easily, right? I will happily spend money, and it's rare that I say no to things because I can't afford them. Whereas my sister, who grew up in the same house with the same parents, is very frugal. And I wish many times that I had a little bit more of her frugality. But Can you talk to us? What are some of the different money personalities or the different relationships that are really common, especially among women, that you're seeing when it comes to how we relate to our money?
Well, there's so many things that I want to unpack there, Sarah. First of all, you're absolutely right. Money is still the elephant in the room. We'll pretty much talk about anything, including sex and politics, before we talk about money. And I really feel that the lack of conversation, especially for women, is what has put us behind the 8 ball as far as equality in pay, in retirement, the whole pink tax that we experience as women as well.
So true.
And, it's not talked about in the home. And so, like most things in life, our parents are our first teachers. And so it's very interesting that you and your sister have 2 different money behaviors or money personalities. And, I have 2 older brothers and I would say same thing. We grew up in the same household, but completely different patterns. And for me, I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and really my parents were both involved in the family business. And so really, really felt that stress around money as a result of that. So I've been doing this for over 25 years. And in 2017, I really narrowed my practice down to behavioral finance. And what I saw was this pattern that we all have cognitive biases when it comes to money that make us do things that we wouldn't normally do with other aspects of our lives, and how closely it is tied to health. And so the model that I came up with is that our money behaviors impact the 4 pillars of financial well-being, which are how you earn, because your limiting beliefs, thoughts, money behaviors impact how much money you earn. And so you may have a behavior where, earning money is no problem at all, but spending is the challenge. And it may be that you make money and then immediately spend it. And then it also impacts how you save and how you invest. And so when we take a look at those 4 different money behaviors, they absolutely impact on a personal level those financial well-being pillars. And then we add on that a small business owner, and those behaviors that you have as an individual that are your core behaviors, they also translate over into how you are with your money inside of your business as well.
So I can definitely relate to being someone who is good at earning money, but I think a lot of women, especially if you are in a salaried position, I think a lot of women are reluctant to ask for a raise, even when it's very well deserved. Is that one of the reasons why a lot of women aren't earning as much money as men?
Absolutely. And again, it comes to those 4 behavior types, personalities. And so if you want to give the quiz at the end in the show notes or what have you, and your listeners can take the quiz to see which one of the behaviors they are, it really falls into, I think what I have seen, especially I work with probably about 85% women, is that we are kind of hesitant when it comes to money. We're hesitant to ask the questions, and we also haven't been given the same skills. It's not something that like I said, we're behind the 8 ball in. And so even in my own experience, I was in corporate, in finance, I was leading a department, and I remember we hired somebody junior to my position, and they offered him a higher salary than mine as his direct report. And so I absolutely had the conversation of, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. And basically I left that position because I truly felt that I was not being supported financially for the job that I was doing. And as well for women, there's so much unpaid work that we do also, and that was a big contributor for me leaving and branching out on my own, was I had two small kids that I wasn't seeing. And I had my daughter's primary teacher actually call and say, your daughter's crying because you're away all the time, which I definitely know she wouldn't have called my husband on. And that was a real impetus for me around the fact that, I didn't want to stay in a position that I was away from my kids and didn't have that flexibility. And in working with me in the last 3 years, like, I'm all about financial freedom. And so for me, it was taking a look at where I was spending my money, and I wasn't spending my money in alignment with my values. If anything, what I was spending on was nice clothes and shoes and days at the spa, trying to fill this hole that I was absolutely unhappy with what I was doing day to day. And it was actually taking me further and further away from my goal, which was to be home with my children. And so when I was passed over for a financial promotion, I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. And really took a look at my spending and saw that wasn't in alignment and gave myself 6 months to not be doing this anymore and saved about $40,000. And I left because I really said to myself, if money isn't the reason for staying, what would I do? And it was to be at home with the girls. And so I think, for women, we're so torn in that. I've helped so many women with just that question of staying in toxic work, staying in toxic relationships, staying in things because they think that they need to stay because of the money. And so that is a question that I like to ask is, if money wasn't the reason for staying, what would you leave? And for a lot of women, it is a job that just is not in alignment with their purpose. But you need to take a look at your money behaviors and really see what is that pillar that I'm having challenges with. Because another thing that a lot of women come in and they say, I'm really bad with money, or people tell me I'm bad with money. And as soon as you have that narrative, it becomes a deep-rooted belief. And it's not that at all. It's just, again, these behaviors that usually we've inherited from our parents and that we're just not given formal education.
Yeah. And that was a big impetus for me hiring you. I was like, I'm a smart cookie. Like, I'm a very smart person, but I'm like, I cannot figure out this money shit because I went out of my way to seek business education through my training, but it still wasn't enough. And again, like, no fault to my parents. Like, my parents are very smart, but that it wasn't really part of my growing up, or it wasn't delivered in a way that I was able to like take it in and receive it. So yeah, I think we do have all these like stories that we're not good with money. I also think there's a lot of shame. And that was something I really wrote down as I was preparing to have this conversation with you. So I think this shows up in a couple of ways. One, you already talked about, is that we're encouraged to not talk about money. And that often perpetuates a lot of these inequalities because you're not encouraged to ask your colleague how much money she's making. You're not encouraged to ask your friend how much money she's making because that is somehow seen as like gauche or weird to do that. And so we never know potentially that our male colleague is making more money for the same job that we are because no one talks about it. And then there's also shame. Like, I feel like it goes both ways. There's shame if you make too much money, or there's shame in wanting to make money. And then there's also shame if you're not making enough money. So it's like one of these many things for women. It's like, it almost like it doesn't matter where you land. There's going to be some kind of shame attached to it. Like, talk to us about what you see. Like, how does shame play a role in terms of our money behaviors?
Well, again, we have these cognitive biases around money that we don't have around other parts of our lives. I mean, for the life of me, I can't keep up a routine for my supplements. I can't do what you do. And we're all given this load of malarkey that we're all supposed to, know things about money. And I find that really, especially for small business owners that I work with, and they think that they need to know their bookkeeping and their finance and their accounting. And if they don't, there's so much shame and shooting all over themselves about it. And again, like, if it's not your zone of genius, I think seeking help is is really healthy. It's the same with, it's not my zone of genius around thyroid and fatigue. And so I seek professionals such as yourself to help me with those areas of my life. And yet with money, like we're supposed to just know what to do with it. And it's ludicrous, because if we're not taught about it in the home, and we're not taught about it in our formal education, and then we become adults and we're just supposed to know what to do with it, like what other aspect in our lives does that come into play? And unfortunately, with money, and kind of parallel with health as well, is that the education that we do receive is from institutions that profit from our ignorance. And so, I often talk about, well, my youngest daughter's going off to Queens in the fall. And when I dropped my oldest daughter off at Ottawa U 3 years ago, we had to wade through Credit Card Alley for Frosh Week to get into the campus bar, just like I did 20 years ago at Dalhousie. And so you have an unformed emotional brain handed a credit card. Without education, what could possibly go wrong? And so, and then we're meant to feel really bad about ourselves. I was actually reading a blog this morning about why you're bad with your money. And it was just such a shameful article, just putting so much shame and blame on people. And yeah, okay, it is our emphasis to get educated, but the system is sort of rigged, if you will, to make that education really hard to seek out. And again, to be educated by those people who profit from our ignorance. So I think that there's just so many layers that society actually puts on us when it comes to money. And then add, if you're a woman and you're being bombarded every day with TikTok, Instagram, about how you should look, what you should spend your money on. If you don't have a $3,000 purse, who are you, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's no wonder that women are just in this tailspin about shame and shoulding all over themselves around money, because we're like, exactly, go buy this purse, that'll change your life. And I can't believe you bought that purse. How absolutely frivolous of you. And so we get these mixed messages all around all of the time. And I think, you have to go back to discerning what's important to you and what are your values, because every dollar that you spend casts a vote for the world that you want to live in. And so really getting in touch with, what is the world that I want to live in? And am I spending in that area? Because let's face it, wealth and prosperity, it's very, very subjective, and it means something different to you, Sarah, than it means to me. And I don't know if you remember, but when we had our intake meeting, the very first behavioral question I asked you is, what does financial freedom mean to you? And I'm here to tell you, after working with thousands of people, everybody says the same thing in some reiteration, which is being able to do what I want, when I want to, with the people I want to do it with, for as long as I want to do it for. It is always some sort of reiteration. It's never been, except for one client and all those thousands who wanted a Mercedes, and we hadn't made that happen, but it's never about materialistic things. It's about the opportunities that money provides for you. It's merely a tool. And yet we put so much emphasis on it, but it's merely, again, a tool. But you're absolutely right. The less money that you have, the less opportunities you have. And your world certainly does shrink when you don't have money. But again, I think we just put too much emphasis on the wrong things.
And I'm sure you see this. I see this all the time. Like, a lot of women are tired. We're overwhelmed. We're stressed to the max. We're overscheduled to death. And so buying shit is like a really easy way to make ourselves feel temporarily better, right? So I think the reason a lot of us are attracted to that skin cream or that purse or that vacation or whatever it is, it's just like, ooh, something nice and shiny and exciting. And again, like you said earlier, if your spending is not actually channeled towards the things that are truly your values, those are always going to fall flat. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you're buying shiny things that don't actually make you feel happier in the long run, like, what is the point of always trying to make more money if we're just spending it in ways that don't bring us joy? One of the things you say that I love is like the idea of giving your money a job, right? If you don't tell your money where to go or what to do, it will very quickly leave your account. So can you talk more about what you mean by like giving your money a job, and maybe how to start thinking about how to align your money more with your values?
Absolutely. So I'll just go back to my example, is that once I put my sort of stake in the ground that this is not how I wanted to live my life anymore. And I quickly, in 6 months, like I said, I think it was $35,000, $40,000 that I was able to save. And I was like, where was April? Where's that come from? Like, why haven't I been doing that all along? So it's where your focus goes is what happens. And it's the same with your money. And, it comes from, The Wealthy Barber, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all of these finance books, How to Think and Grow Rich, like right from the get-go, is that it's the whole idea of paying yourself first and having these accounts automated for purposes that are important to you. So if you give your money a job, and what I mean by that is open up a bank account, label it vacations, start to put aside X amount of your salary or percentage if you're self-employed into these accounts. And lo and behold, after 4, 5, 6 months, it's amazing how much money are in these different accounts for these purposes that are near and dear to you, and that you haven't noticed. You're still living a great lifestyle and you haven't noticed that it's not there. And so it all comes back to what's called Parkinson's law. And what Parkinson's law states is that demand will always meet supply. So if you limit the supply, i.e., don't keep everything in one bank account, but have these automations going into different bank accounts, you will make do with what you have. And so the classic example that I give is, someone's making a car payment for 5 years and no problem, never miss a car payment. And then the car payment is done. And instead of funneling that money into an RRSP or savings or what have you, it just all of a sudden, you don't have that $500 a month anymore because it just disappears into the ether. And so if you don't give your money a job and channel it in the directions that you want it to go into, it's going to flow wherever it wants to. And then lo and behold, you're like, I actually had somebody the other day say, is somebody going into my bank account and taking money? Because I literally don't know where it's going. I'm making a really great income and I literally don't know where my money's going. So one of the things that we do at the Money Fix Institute, as you know, is we actually comb through 4 months worth of your spending. We look at your credit cards, your checking accounts, your lines of credit, all of it. And we know from doing this for so long what the behavioral traps are. And then we come back, not in a judgmental way, but in a way to shine a light on awareness of this is where you're spending. And if this brings you joy, as you know, we build that into the plan. Mm-hmm. But if it's not bringing you joy and it's something that you didn't even realize that you're doing, what you'll quickly find is that by working a spending plan, you will be living in this place of abundance on less money and having money channeled into the places that are of value to you. I think like everything in life, like you say, especially for women, we're so overscheduled. And the last thing that we can think about is, where's my money going? But if you stick to a plan and then you start to see, okay, I see now where my money is going. Awareness is the first step. Second step is acceptance, and then taking action and making these accounts and then working the plan.
How involved do you encourage? Because I think there's maybe 2 camps of people. I think there are women who are the money managers of the family. And I think we know statistically, like, women make a lot of the financial decisions. Mm-hmm. Even if they're not earning the money, they're involved in the deciding of the spending of the money. So I feel like some women are like hyper involved in the management of the family budget. And then I think maybe there's another camp of women who are more hands off, who are like, I'm going to let my partner, my spouse, my husband, whoever, take care of that. And I don't really need to look at the numbers. Like, what's a healthy amount of involvement? Like, what do you suggest? How involved should we be in our family management of money?
This is such a great question. And again, I'll tell you my story because it's a story I know best. So I hyper vigilant. My money behavior is rock steady, which means I'm a spreadsheeter. I'm a budgeter. I'm a no fun Bobby. So it was very unhealthy for my relationship with my husband because we were in alignment with everything in our relationship except money. And so he's an idealist that everything is just going to work out in the end. You know, his parents were both employees, really good jobs, really good pensions, union jobs. And so he came from a totally different background than me. And so you have one person's story and another person's money story coming together as a union, and you're trying to figure this out when you haven't figured it out before. And so that's why we know statistically money stress is the number one reason for relationship breakdown in this country. And that would be my experience as well. And so, you know, I was just too involved, over involved. It wasn't fun. It was like literally if he went to Starbucks, I had an alert on my phone and I would know, like, I mean, it was in my bank account 4 or 5 times a day. And I'm not even exaggerating. Ask him. And so in 2017, he and I went to see a money coach because we knew this was an area in our relationship that we wanted to work on. And what we did is exactly what I teach is we built a spending plan. And at first he was like shocked by his red wine habit of when we went through the finances. And he's like, I don't see how this is going to work. But I was completely fatigued from doing all the CFO duties. You know, I was looking after the day-to-day, the budget, the investments, the mortgage, the insurances, all of it. And it's my zone of genius. So it made sense that I would do this. My husband also has ADHD and a learning disability. So I'm neurotypical. He's neurodivergent. And so money was always something that his brain just couldn't understand. And so what we did is we came to a healthy balance in our marriage where we worked the spending plan to the place now where he runs all of the household budget, if you will, or the spending plan. And I literally would never have handed that over to him if we didn't have the plan that I now teach. And it's very much, we boil it down to one weekly number. And as long as you're taking care of that one weekly number for your behavioral spending, everything else will fall in line. And so it's no longer about spreadsheeting. It's no longer about taking a look at everything. I think this is one of the sort of reasons why women or clients, you know, don't fix their money challenges because they feel like I've on top of everything else I have to do. Now this person's going to ask me to spreadsheet. Now this person's going to ask me to meet with them. Now this person is going to put so much more work on me and I already am overworked and I already feel guilty about this. So that's something that we try really hard not to do is just make it really simple, part of your routine. You start to see the impact really quickly. And then you have this dopamine transfer of instead of spending money to saving money and seeing it start to work for you. So I think there's absolutely a healthy balance. I think my husband didn't look at things enough and he relied heavily on me. There'd be times I'm like, I could leave you tomorrow and you don't even know how to get into your bank account. And he's like, well, I trust you. And I'm like, I'm not sure that you should, like, honestly.
Yeah.
And I, on the other hand, was a control freak and had all of the control of everything. And I wasn't happy in that position either. So I think you need to have a real balance. I don't think that you need to be spending hours in your money. But what I know to be true is that and this was a statistic that one of our coaches told me yesterday, Francesca, is that on average, we spend 14 minutes a week on looking on and working on our finances, and we worry for 7 hours. So we've got to have this balance of, you know, if you actually work on your finances more than 14 minutes, you're not going to worry about it for 7 hours. And so You do have to not ostrich, like don't be the escapist when it comes to your money, but you shouldn't be on the rock steady side of things too. So it really is like all things in life, Sarah, and health and everything else, which you do such a great job at teaching your patients. It's about balance and having a balance between the two. I think there's like this misconception that people like myself who are rock steady, we got our money shit together and we've got the investments and we've got this and we've got that. Well, that's actually the money behavior whose head, when it hits the pillow, stresses the most about money. And what we know to be true is that if you're not sleeping because you're stressed, a whole world of things can happen with your health as well. So it's about balance. And I have to say that since 2017, with Joachim and I working the plan together, do we still argue about money? Of course, but not the way that it was before. And knowing that he's taking care of this side of things, like honestly, he doesn't like me to go shopping with him anymore because I overspend. I'm just so out of the realm of it now. So I think you got to strike a healthy balance. You need to know what's happening, but I don't think you need to be in there 5 times a day and spreadsheeting and dropping every, it's like counting your macros and your calories. Like you can do that for about a week or two, but after that, it gets old pretty quick.
It sure does. Yeah. I think you brought up a really important point, which is we often assume that everyone else has their money shit together. I know this is something that's like a mental trap for me, that I assume that like my colleagues and my friends are like so much more financially savvy and they must have no debt, or if it like, again, we tell all these stories and what you said, like my jaw opened, which you can't see on the podcast, but like, I can't imagine spending 7 hours a day worrying, right? Like a week, sorry, still the amount of like mental and emotional energy that is draining from people just worrying about their money. One of the things I'd love for us to talk about, and we kind of got into it a little bit in this last conversation, is one of the things that I definitely learned from my parents, and I can't remember if it was directly communicated or indirectly communicated, but my parents separated when I was 17. And what I heard from that was never rely on a man for money. Whether or not that was explicitly stated, I have no idea. But that's how I internalized it. And when you and I met, one of my huge pain points is like talking to my spouse about money, because we keep most of our money separate. And the thought of having to rely on someone for me is like deeply, deeply difficult. So I don't know if you've seen this trend, but there is this trend right now of a lot of women coming back more to like a traditional role in the home. I see you smiling. The trad wives who stay home and don't work outside the home, and who want to like escape kind of that hustle. And I get the desire to escape the hustle, but the like feminist part of me is like, ooh, girl, keep your own credit card and like keep your own bank account. Like, what are your thoughts around women's financial health and how that allows this? You said it earlier, like if you need to get out of a shitty situation, like if money was not an issue, what would you leave? And the sad reality is I think a lot of women would leave their relationships if money was not an issue. So where's maybe that healthy balance where I think it is good to trust and rely on other people? I'm working on it. But also to make sure that you've got your own financial house in order so that if something happens, that you are not stuck somewhere that you don't want to be stuck.
Well, first of all, statistically speaking, women outlive men. And so we do have to get our financial houses in order. And that can be education around where's the insurance policy? How much insurance do I have? What is the protection? I think especially for women that have their name on any joint asset, they have the absolute right to know what's the mortgage, where's the mortgage held, what happens if someone defaults on the mortgage, is the mortgage getting paid, any of those sort of joint assets. And as well, like I said, just statistically speaking, women are going to outlive their male counterparts. And so they need to be making sure that they're protected, especially if they've decided to exit the workforce to support a family at home. And I think as well, There needs to be I think if in that sort of situation, there needs to be open communication, and I've absolutely have seen financial abuse happen in relationships, both male and female being abused. And I think that we don't talk about that enough either. That absolutely happens. I was working with a professional woman, and she literally handed over her paycheck, and she was at a conference once, and she bought a dress and was reprimanded for buying a dress when she was the head breadwinner, professional woman. And when she told me this, I like you said, my jaw, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine my husband doing that to me. But it just, I think having your own, this is, I guess, why I really love Profit First. You talked about it in my intro, is that I have my own profit account for my business. And I go and buy whatever it is that I want to. And my husband has his own, and he goes and buys whatever it is that he wants to. But everything else is all joint and together. So I think we absolutely have to have financial autonomy in our relationships. I think it's healthy. But I've also have seen, and the opposite work, which would be my situation, where everything is it's one pot and everything comes together. And so, Sarah, for that question, I find it's what your comfort level is. This is the thing with me. If you work with me, I'm going to work with your behaviors, not try to change your behaviors. I can give you some suggestions, but you telling me this is my lived experience from my mom, and so this is a deep-rooted financial belief that I have, I think it's a disservice of me to try and absolutely change that, but to work with how you feel. And as you know, make some suggestions, whether you realized I was making them or not, but subliminally, I was always making suggestions on how things. I feel very strongly that if you have one person in the relationship that is a higher earner than the other, then there should be an even split, not 50-50, but if somebody's making X amount more, then maybe it's 70-30 for the bills, because that other person who's not making the same amount, and you're asking them to contribute 50-50, they could be just drowning in debt. And if you're going to share your lives together, you don't want that. And a lot of times people could be married for years. I'm working with a couple right now that are in retirement, and this is the first time they've talked about money. And they've been married for 40-50 years. And so I think what I like is I have some money date questions. And I know this doesn't sound very romantic, but, one night a week, have a money date and start with some really benign questions and then work yourselves up. I also believe that if you're dating someone, you should know their credit score beforehand. And you should, if you're okay with that other person's credit score, you know that, and you work towards it. So I think for women, it really is a balance of absolutely knowing where you stand financially is a good thing, because unfortunately in 25 years of doing this, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And actually my first insurance claim, you've heard me tell this story, when I was 24 years old, was to a widow who the check that I delivered to her was a third of what she was expecting, because her husband didn't tell her that he canceled 2 policies. And so I absolutely think that you need to be asking curious questions. You need to be taking care of yourself and your family. And if anybody needs help with what those questions are, or any of these date night sort of questions to get the ball rolling, I'm certainly absolutely willing to share that. I think that those conversations go better than what people are anticipating too, right? It's like, I always say sunlight is the best disinfectant when it comes to your money. Bring it out into the sunlight. Asking your partner these questions, you may be scared to ask the questions, and they may be absolutely genuinely happy that finally you're interested.
Well, if you remember, I resisted so hard when you first suggested that I talk to Sadler. I was like, I really don't want to. What are the other options? And then when I finally did it, which like I caused myself so much stress and worry, he was like, sure, no problem. And I was like, I worked myself up into a whole thing for something that really wasn't as big of a deal to him as I thought it was. So yeah, I think these are like, money is one of those conversations, like sex, like politics, like whatever it is. Like we do need to be having them out into the open because it takes some of the like shame and secrecy out of it. You'll realize that everyone else has their own money shit. Like there's very few people I think who have all their money shit figured out. And again, like it impacts your day to day. It impacts your anxiety, your sleep, your relationships. That's one of the like biggest gifts that I got out of our work together is, yeah, I have my like spending amount that I know as long as I'm staying in that, I can spend that on whatever I feel like that month. And I don't have guilt when I do that anymore. And I do really enjoy saving, which I wouldn't have expected for someone who also loves spending. So if someone's listening to this and they can really like hear themselves in the conversation and they're like, okay, I'm ready to, maybe get my financial house in order. It's something maybe I've been hyper fixating or ignoring. What would be like the first step, or what would be the like first piece of advice for a woman who's otherwise probably like very high achieving, succeeding in all the other areas, but maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed or stressed out when it comes to the money piece? Where should we start?
I think the biggest place to start is on the savings piece, and to just open a savings account and start putting a certain percentage or even a dollar amount over into that account just for you, for whatever it may be. Maybe it is that you then take that and you get the dopamine transfer from spending to saving it. And then maybe you open a Wealthsimple account and do some day trading with it or what have you. But I think it's like I've been saying a lot lately to clients is like, you can't break it. You can't break it. Like for the longest time, I was scared of tech and I'm like, I'm just going to try it. I can't break it. And so just dabble in. I think as well, starting out with, especially if you're interested in what we've been talking around money and money mindset, like one of my very first and most favorite books was I've got it right here. No one's going to see this. Anyway, The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And really start to see, Lynn does work with people who have a lot of money and don't have their money shit together. And people that don't, in the traditional sense, have a lot of money who are living happy, lovely, abundant lives. And she really dives into that. So I think, start with a savings account and start educating yourself. Start with that book, listen to some podcasts. I do caution around heading to socials, just like I'm sure you caution as well, because there's some really crazy money advice out there. I don't know if you saw my newsletter there's this whole thing about getting feral with your finances and, and the girl math and all that crap that we've seen. So like everything, you gotta be discerning, but like everything, it all starts with education and educating yourself. And so there's some really great books, but start with putting aside and having that money for yourself and starting to like I said, I've been in finance for 25 years and it was so empowering for me to open that account and just start squirreling money away for an exit strategy, and how so quickly I was able to squirrel that money away and for a greater purpose. And I think for me, and I think for most women, I had to anchor that to something that was important to me and for me to keep going. And it was my girls. And so knowing that I wanted to be home with the girls, knowing the life that I want to have for my girls, like all of that has always been, when it even comes to what I'm going to charge for pricing for my products and services, I've had to anchor that in my family in order for that to really hold and keep me motivated. But I think, just start with this book or another book. I can give you others, and start with that savings account and just just get going, just play with it.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to like make mistakes, right? It's like, don't aim to be perfect. Like it's not going to be perfect. Just start and do it.
Start.
And the other thing that came up when you were saying a savings account, the other thing I see, and I'm sure you see this too, is how readily we will spend money on our kids. Like we'll sign them up for the hockey and the baseball and the math and and then you ask a woman to like spend money on herself or put money and she's like, oh no, I don't, I can't do that. So I think there's also like energetically, yes, save some money and also don't be afraid to spend money on things that matter to you. You don't have to spend your money only on other people. You're allowed to spend it on yourself too.
I saw a meme a couple of months ago and it was, your kid doesn't need another new outfit, you need a bra. And I was like, gosh, I wish I had seen that when my kids were little.
So true. So true. Yes. April, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a lot, even though we've been working together for a long time. And I know that our listeners are going to take away some really great stuff from this episode. So thank you for being here. If you've been listening to this and realizing that money is one of the things that's making you tired, maybe it's how much you worry about it, how much time you spend looking or not looking at your bank account, I want to encourage you to take a look at your financial wellness as the next step in fixing your fatigue. Check out the show notes. I will link to the book that April recommended, The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. It is a great read. And I will also link to how you can find more of April's wonderful knowledge. She's been so instrumental in helping me reshape my relationship with money and has saved me many hours of worrying. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you right back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you would send it to a woman in your life who needs to hear it. And there's no better way to help me reach more women who want to fix their fatigue than to take 2 minutes to leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. Ready to get more insight into what's making you tired? Find out which of the 5 most common types of fatigue you're dealing with by taking my fatigue fingerprint quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Are you dealing with frazzled fatigue, where your body's exhausted but your brain won't shut up, making it hard for you to fall asleep? Or maybe you're more of the drained fatigue type, where no matter how much sleep you get, you're never rested and struggle to get up in the morning. Just take my fatigue fingerprint quiz and your results will include a list of recommended labs you can ask your doctor for, as well as my top recommendations for which habits and practices are best for fixing your type of fatigue. Find the quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Because being tired all the time isn't normal, and you deserve to have good energy. Last but not least, I want to thank Jen Hudson and Mike Trutler over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks. Bye!